Over at BangTheBook.com, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. Lots of great stuff being put together by our excellent cast of writers. I've got a preview up for this weekend's Breeders' Cup Classic, and we're also going to do a special edition of Bang the Book Radio on Friday, talking with Brian Blessing, our resident horse racing expert, about this week at the Breeders' Cup there at Santa Anita. Not just the main event, the Classic, but also some of the other races that are on the card here for this weekend. Should be a whole lot of fun. And there's also a video preview over on our Bang the Book YouTube page with Brian's thoughts on the Breeders' Cup. Also over at the website, daily NHL stuff from Parker Michaels, Danny Vorgs' updated NFL power ratings and model projections for this week, my college football power ratings, and as always, we have situational betting tips for college football, the NBA, and the NHL. Got NASCAR coverage for you this weekend, UFC 244, had a very good golf preview from James Mazzola for the WGC HSBC Champions event. Soccer previews. The tennis season is over, but when that comes back around, Big Ten Watto with some great outright write-ups for us. Tons of good stuff going on over at the website. Please make sure you check it all out. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. And as we wrap up this week on the show, you can find the segments of Bang the Book Radio over on our Bang the Book YouTube page. You can also find them on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Podbean, TuneIn, Overcast. Wherever you find your podcast content, you're going to find Bang the Book Radio there, whether it's the full shows or the segments, whatever you're looking for, plenty of ways to find that. All right, let's go. Week 9 of the Westgate SuperContest here, and I got to be honest with you, Monday and Tuesday were very, very difficult mentally for me, coming off of the Cardinal sin here in the SuperContest, an 0-5 week, now 19, 20, and 1 on the season, and you know, these are things that are very tough to come back from, and I kind of felt that here this week because now at this point in time, probably just playing for personal pride. 53 points was the cutoff in the SuperContest last year. So obviously I've got a very long way to go with that here. 45 picks left in the SuperContest. Would have to hit 35 of them in order to make the money. So for now, probably just looking at personal pride more than anything. However, the Circa Million, still some opportunities there in that. You've got the quarter prizes. The third quarter starts here this week and runs through week 12. Then the fourth quarter, week 13 through week 17, where the top prize is $143,750. So still some reasons to be engaged in the Circa and reasons to be engaged here in the SuperContest as well. Going for some personal pride here, try to get back on track. And also, too, there is the mini contest for $20,000 at the end of the year. So hopefully can make some moves here, kind of get back in the running. But you know what? Look, every year, no matter how much you do this, and I've done this here at Bang the Book for several years, every year, every season, every week, every day, you learn something new here in this business. You figure out a different way of looking at things, a different way of breaking things down. So hopefully we can bounce back here in the SuperContest. And look, I mean, at this point last year, I was 10, 25, and 5. So at least I'm doing better than that. Again, obviously a long shot to make the money here, but still a lot of personal pride on the line. And also, too, I've got listeners, I've got readers, some people that greatly respect my opinions, and I certainly want to validate those people. So going to do everything I can here to finish the NFL season strong, hopefully beginning here in week 9. And you know what? Maybe a 5-0 will get me back on track here a little bit. So that would be the hope here for this week. That is 19, 20, and 1 with the Bang the Book podcast entry, the BangTheBook.com entry, 2 and 3 last week. Now 21 and 19 overall. Last week, the field in the SuperContest, 46.34%, now 49.99% overall. So virtually flipping coins here on these NFL sides with no VIG and the stale numbers that come out on Wednesday night. So a little bit disconcerting at the field, now below 50% here. The leaders did split the midseason $15,000 prize at 31 and 9. Right now, the top 100 plus ties would be 26 points. So, again, got to get hot here and hopefully make some ground up. Last week in the traditional SuperContest, the consensus was 6 and 8 Green Bay and Kansas City had the exact same number of picks, hence the 6-8 record. Top 5 consensus went 2-3. Year to date now, the Super Contest consensus, the most selected side in each game, 53, 63, and 2. The top 5 consensus now 21 and 19 on the season. Over in the gold, just 44.52% last week, now 50.95% for the season. Interestingly enough, the Circa Million field last week, 52.01%, so about 5.75% better than the traditional Super Contest field. The Circa comes in at 50.63% now year to date. And keep in mind, again, that's with that huge discrepancy in week 2 between the Browns game in the Circa, where it was 6.5, and where it was 2.5 in the Super Contest. Obviously, the Browns covered every number there, but over 2,000 entrants took that in the Super Contest. Less, or I think just about 10.7% of the field or something like that in the Circa Million wound up taking that game. So a big difference there, yet the Circa still doing better here this season, year to date. And congratulations to the entry, Concrete Mike, 17-2-1, the winning score there in the second quarter. So it was 17-3 for the first quarter, 17-2-1 here in the second quarter. And with my 0-5 over in the Circa, now 18-21-1 with that entry. So again, the third quarter starts up here this week in the Circa Million. So that gives me something to shoot for. And again, looking for personal pride and a chance to get back in the running here in the Super Contest, maybe string a couple of good weeks together. One of the things I do like to do here on this segment every week, now that we've got the Circa Million to compete with the Super Contest, is to look at the line differences between the games here, between those two contests. And we've got some interesting ones here, nothing earth-shattering, but the Texans are -1 in the Super Contest, -1.5 over in the Circa. Chiefs -2.5 at the Westgate, -2 down at the Golden Gate, downtown where Circa Sports is located. Raiders -2.5 in the Super Contest, 2 in the Circa. Seahawks -6 in the Super Contest, 5.5 in the Circa. Browns -3 in the Super Contest, 3.5 over in the Circa. Patriots -3 in the Super Contest and 3.5 in the Circa. So the Circa moving off of some of those key numbers here. 3 certainly being the penultimate key number. 6 also being a little bit of one. But the Circa going with a lot of half-point lines here this week, where the Super Contest has some flat numbers, in particular, on those key numbers there. So we'll see how that affects not just my card, but the cards of the other people out there in terms of the contest. And again, keep in mind here, too, when you talk about the quarter prize in the Circa, there could be some more equity in going for that full point as opposed to the push on a half point. So, again, game theory does come into play a little bit. I'll talk more about that as the season goes along, in particular because I'll be trying to make up ground in both of these contests here to the point where maybe taking some of those flat numbers, running the risk of a half point, just not necessarily worth it as we go forward here throughout the rest of the season. So we take a look here in the Super Contest at the 3 likely picks to make my card, and I've got a handful of leans here for you as well. Last week, look, the Panthers were a bad handicap. The Buccaneers got unlucky with that blown whistle and Jameis Winston with more turnovers than an Arby's. And those things happen. The Bears should have won the game. They had a bunch of red zone opportunities. They kicked a bunch of short field goals. Kind of ridiculous that Matt Nagy would do that. But that's what you're up against here in the NFL sometimes. Sometimes you're going to read a game wrong, like Carolina coming off the bye. Other times, you're just going to run into bad luck or bad officiating or something else. And sometimes you're going to run on the right side of those things. And so far this year, it feels like I haven't run on the right side of really any of them, but I've run on the bad side of a lot of different circumstances. So hopefully, they say those things even out. I don't know if it's true or not, but I'm hoping that they kind of do here as we go forward. In any event, as far as my very likely picks go, and again, recording this on Thursday evening before the trick-or-treaters start banging on the door for the Friday show, so things can change. Things can change throughout the day on Friday with updated injury reports, different weather factors, stuff like that. So, again, these picks are very likely to make my card, not a guarantee to make the card, but generally speaking, they're going to. I haven't changed my mind too much here so far this season. So, beginning with number 4, the Jacksonville Jaguars here, they are +1 in the Super Contest for that early game across the pond in London. And look, I mean, this is basically a home game for Jacksonville. You know, the Texans have played an international game. They played in Mexico City a few years ago, but they've never played in London. And it is a change. Not just the time change, but you know, obviously you're staying in a different hotel than you normally would, different types of travel considerations to the stadium. You've got a pro Jacksonville crowd here as well. So there's also that. So, you know, Jacksonville just a lot more comfortable in the setting. And I do think that definitely matters here when you talk about these London games. You look at Houston, and obviously they've got to figure some different things out defensively without J.J. Watt. They've been playing better defensively here of late, but now without a game changer, a disruptor like Watt, a lot of teams are going to play with a lot less fear, you know, because when you think about it, and watch Ohio State games with Chase Young, you know, watch games against the Rams with Aaron Donald, watch games against, you know, teams like the 49ers where they've got such great edge pressure. Maybe those guys don't always get there. Maybe they don't always get the sacks, but the defensive coordinators know that teams are going to actively run plays away from that side. So their defensive formation isn't spread out as much. They can put that extra help side defender on the wide side of the field or on the side where Watt or Young or Bosa or any of these other guys where those players aren't lined up. So this changes a lot of things for the Houston Texans not to have Watt. It opens up the entire field and the entire playbook for the opposition. And Houston's not a very good defense anyway. In fact, Jacksonville, 0.4 yards per play better on defense than the Houston Texans. And also, think about this. All the love about the Houston offense, all the love about Deshaun Watson, and it's deserved. Deshaun Watson is a phenomenal player. But the Jaguars are almost right there in yards per play on offense. Houston only 0.1 more yards per play on offense than Jacksonville. So this is a pretty big deal here for Houston that Jacksonville's offense, at least on a yards per play basis, is about even with them, and Jacksonville's defense is substantially better. Houston, with those injury concerns, with Watt, with Will Fuller, DeAndre Hopkins limited in practice again this week, probably just a veteran thing for him. But this Jaguars defense getting a little bit better here. Opponents are only scoring on 30.1% of their possessions against Jacksonville, even though the Jaguars are tied for 21st in takeaways with 9. So they've done a good job of keeping the opposition from scoring, even though they're not taking the football away. You look at the Patriots, they're taking the football away from everybody. So their possession or their opponent's percentage of possessions ending in points is very, very low. That's the case that you get a lot of times, you know, because you can't score without the football. Jacksonville playing well in its base defense, maybe bending at times, not breaking, whereas opponents are scoring on 40% of their possessions against the Houston Texans. Jacksonville held down Watson in that week 2 game. It was Gardner Minshew's first start. He's got a lot more experience now. The Jaguars do get fairly decent pressure, and they're 10th in adjusted net yards per pass attempt allowed. Houston, 26th in adjusted net yards per pass attempt. And again, that's with Watt and with the impact that Watt has on plays run to the opposite side of the field. So I think Jacksonville is set up really nicely here in this game. Factor in their familiarity with the setting. Factor in that this line is coming down, even though the consensus shows money on Houston. I'm on the Jacksonville Jaguars here, +1 to get that win over in London. Next up on the card for me here is number 12, the Minnesota Vikings, who are +2.5 in the Super Contest. We don't even have a line out there in the market otherwise because everybody's wondering whether or not Patrick Mahomes is going to play. I'm on the Vikings here regardless, and I understand that if Mahomes is announced as the starting quarterback, this line will probably open higher in the market than 2.5. So there is a chance that I'm taking a bad number here. Of course, if Matt Moore winds up playing, there's a chance that this winds up being an okay number. Maybe the Vikings are a road favorite like Green Bay was, something like that. But I want to take this irrespective of whether or not Mahomes plays this game because I think Minnesota's just in a good spot, and I don't think people realize just how good this Minnesota team is. They should carve up this Kansas City defense. Kansas City's defense, 29th in yards per carry allowed. Some of their defensive numbers aided by playing some really mediocre offenses over the course of the schedule. But Kansas City has also allowed over 400 yards 4 times so far this year. Looks like Adam Thielen probably going to play with a little bit of extra rest. They're keeping Stephon Diggs happy. Kirk Cousins is playing really, really well. And you've got to think that the switch over to Kevin Stefanski has worked in Kirk Cousins' favor. I know Cousins had some very negative highlights early on in the season, but real quietly, this Minnesota offense is top 3 in yards per play. Stefanski, a young guy in his late 30s, been with the Vikings for a very long time. This passing game is efficient. This rush attack is efficient. And it certainly seems like Cousins is really fitting in here nicely after some of the mess that they had last year with offensive coordinators like Norv Turner and some of the other people that were there. I think Stefanski fits well. I think Cousins is comfortable with him. I think this offense is humming right along. And I don't see a whole lot of resistance coming from that Kansas City defense. Now, look, the Vikings defense doesn't grade all that well in pressure. And I wish they pressured a little bit more so that if Patrick Mahomes plays, they can go chase him around as he's dealing with that knee injury. But what the Vikings have done really, really well is cover. And if this winds up being Matt Moore, a guy who's not nearly as mobile as Mahomes, can't improvise as much as Mahomes, I think this is a situation that actually, in a lot of ways, sets up really well for this Minnesota defense. If Mahomes plays, he's what, 70, 75%? If Moore plays, you're asking a backup quarterback to go up against a Vikings defense that has played very well this year, does very well against the pass, limits big plays. They're top 10 in yards after catch allowed. I think everything points to the Vikings here in this game, whether it's Mahomes or not. So again, this one very likely to make my card. We'll see what sorts of updates we get on Mahomes and what happens here when this line actually gets posted in the marketplace. But number 12, the Minnesota Vikings plus 2.5, definitely on my very likely list here for this week. Next up, we got a favorite here. That is number 17, the Oakland Raiders, who are a 2.5-point favorite as they host the Detroit Lions here. I wish I could play the over in the SuperContest because I think that's the best bet in this game. But the Raiders are back at home for the first time in 6 weeks. Long road trip for Detroit here. The first one for them since the opener when they played against Arizona. They played, at Philadelphia and at Green Bay, I believe. So they haven't had too many, frequent flyer miles here over the last little while. The defense has allowed a ton of passing yards here this season for the Lions. They've allowed the second most air yards in the NFL. I will say that Oakland is number 1, hence my thoughts here on the over. But the Raiders this season, despite having 28 fewer pass attempts, and I believe 32 fewer plays, I want to say, they still have a higher yards per play than the Detroit Lions. And I think there's some positive regression coming here for this Raiders team. They're 5th in average time of possession on drives. They're 6th in yards per drive, but they're 15th in points per drive. The Raiders are 3rd in third down conversion rate on offense. The Lions are 29th in third down conversion rate against on defense. So the Raiders should extend a lot of drives here in this game. Seems like Derek Carr is getting along well with John Gruden. Josh Jacobs gets to take his cracks against a very bad Detroit Lions rush defense. This game is probably a shootout, but I do like the Raiders here. Again, minus 2.5. I think Gruden has a good game plan. I think they come out well at home in their first home game back in 6 weeks. And also a long trip here for Detroit. If Oakland can play from in front, it's really going to help them here in this matchup. Oakland, far too often in those road games, wound up playing from big deficits and just couldn't really do a whole lot offensively and couldn't get enough stops defensively. Here, I think it's a different type of scenario with Detroit making such a long trip. And also, too, I think Oakland's going to be very well prepared for this game. I kind of wonder about Matt Patricia and his preparedness. And I also wonder about Matt Patricia's ability to make adjustments as the game goes along. I think the Raiders have a coaching advantage here in this particular game. So Raiders minus 2.5 on my list of very likely picks here for this weekend. So the 3 very likely picks in the SuperContest this week: Jaguars +1, Vikings +2.5, Raiders minus 2.5. As far as some leans here that I'm looking at for this week, we'll start with number 7 by SuperContest rotation order. The Carolina Panthers. They're a 3.5-point favorite here, hosting the Tennessee Titans. And maybe I was just a week early on Carolina. Last week just getting trucked by the 49ers. The 49ers came ready to play. The Panthers didn't. And sometimes that'll happen coming off of a bye. We all think of the bye as something that's a big-time positive, and at least for the workload of Christian McCaffrey, I think it should be. But sometimes it's a little bit hard for teams to get back on track, and in particular, get back on track starting with a game so far away from home there in Santa Clara, all the way across the country. Late kickoff throws off your schedule. Your schedule's already thrown off because you're coming off of a bye. I would be kind of interested to find out how teams do off a bye week when they're playing cross country, when they're playing in a different time zone, when everything is different about the game day. You've got that travel on Friday or Saturday, whenever teams decide to leave. It's got to be hard because you've already had that routine interrupted by the bye week, because you're used to playing. You're used to your routines and practice times and everything else. You've already had that disruption to your circadian rhythm. Maybe it's a bad thing to start a long way from home off that bye and try to get things back on track. So for the Panthers here, I think being back at home with a bigger sense of urgency off the loss are a couple of really big factors in their favor here. Christian McCaffrey, only 18 touches last week, 14 carries, 4 receptions. He should still be fresh. He should still be ready. He should still be good to go. The Panthers are still third in adjusted net yard per pass attempt allowed. Yeah, the run defense isn't great, and that is a concern against Tennessee, but they've had 2 games where they were really bad. In the first game of the season, and then in that game against the 49ers last week. Titans, only 5 yards per play on the season. They've been outgained in 6 of their 8 games so far. And something we talked about this week, throughout the week, basically, on Bang the Book Radio, looking mostly in the context of the Oregon Ducks. 2 games they probably could have lost. 2 games maybe that you could say they should have lost. You feel like that third game, the shit hits the fan, and they do wind up losing that game. I think in this case, that could be the spot here for Tennessee, where they should have lost the last 2 weeks. They had that officiating blunder last week. The Chargers missed just golden opportunities, had a couple of touchdowns taken off the board because of reviews and fumbles and everything else. The Titans have been living on the right side of luck. And when you've got a couple near losses and win those ugly games back to back, usually it comes to a head in that third game. So Panthers minus 3.5, probably the strongest of my set of leans here, the most likely to make it onto the card alongside the Raiders, the Vikings, and the Jaguars. Next up on my short list here, number 16, the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're a 1-point underdog against the Indianapolis Colts. And this is a little bit of a contrarian look. There's not a whole lot of interest in the Steelers here for this week, but the Steelers get a lot of pressure. They pressure very well on the edges. Something that they've done here over the last few years through the draft is infuse a lot of speed and a lot of edge talent with some outside linebackers, with some defensive ends. I wonder how Jacoby Brissett will do with that, because Jacoby Brissett hasn't been pressured a whole lot. Early on in the year, the Colts had some questions with their offensive line, and teams kind of took a little bit of advantage of that. But lately, Brissett hasn't faced a whole lot of pass rushers. Last week, the Broncos did have 4 sacks, only for 11 yards, so maybe some more of the coverage variety. But the Steelers have a top 5 run defense. They're very aggressive in their blitz packages. They get back there, and they disrupt some things. And I do wonder how Brissett handles that, in particular with T.Y. Hilton on the injury list once again. I don't think he practiced on Thursday, so you do kind of wonder about that a little bit. And also, too, here, Mason Rudolph got better as that game went along against the Dolphins. I know it's the Dolphins. I know they suck. I know they've been a bad second-half team, but Mason Rudolph got better as that game went along, got rolling a little bit, got a little bit of confidence going coming off the injury. And Indianapolis, I just talked about some of the travel considerations for some of these teams. Indianapolis has only played 1 road game in the last 5 weeks. I think this line is very telling about Pittsburgh's chances. I think that the public is aligning itself with Indianapolis, and I don't mind going against that here this week. So number 16, the Pittsburgh Steelers, +1 on my short list of leans. Another one here, number 19, the Seattle Seahawks. They're a 6-point favorite, and this is a square point of view, I think. But look, man, I can't in good conscience ever back Jameis Winston again. 11 turnovers the last 2 weeks here for the Buccaneers, most of them on Jameis Winston. Third game of the season with 4 or more turnovers last week for Seattle. And Seattle takes very good care of the football. They have lost 7 fumbles this year, but Russ has only thrown 1 interception. And if there are going to be extra possessions for Seattle in this game, excuse me, and it certainly looks like there should be, given that Jameis Winston is involved, I think that you've probably got a pretty good situation here for Seattle. Furthermore, again, looking at another scheduling situation here, this is the 5th straight road game for Tampa Bay and their 6th road game out of the last 7. Now, they did have a bye week included in there after the game in London, but like Oakland, they have not been home for quite some time. So I think this is a tough spot for them. Long trip up to Seattle. I get it. Everyone wants to fade Seattle. I understand why. I think the Seahawks are kind of a fraudulent team, but I don't know if this is the week to fade them. I think this may be a week to possibly back them, look to fade them in some of their subsequent matchups, but I don't think Tampa Bay is in a good spot at all whatsoever here. Again, Winston can't take care of the football. Lots and lots of travel for this team. You kind of wonder internally if there's some discussion on how Winston's just not the guy, and you sort of wonder if they move on from him in next season. And if that's the case, he's got to hear those whispers. I mean, he's got to know, and I get it. Again, Seattle is a fade-worthy team, given that they have overachieved this season. And I know this is a square look, but Seattle's probably going to wind up with an extra possession or 2 in this game because of some turnovers and because they take care of the football. And that may be all the difference that they need here to get Russ and the boys some points on the board. So number 19, the Seattle Seahawks, again, very public. I get it, but -6, one of my leans here for this week. A couple others to touch on very briefly here. Looking at some contrarian dogs in the Ravens and the Giants in primetime spots. Again, I've gone up against the Patriots twice in the last 2 weeks with the Jets and with the Browns. Maybe this is the spot where they get tripped up. Maybe this is where they have a difficult game with Harbaugh coming off the bye. But Brad Powers talked about it on Thursday's show. Bill Belichick is outstanding against first and second year quarterbacks. 69% against the spread in his career against the second year quarterback. So that does give me some pause. I'm going to try and see what's going on with this game. Look some more at how this line is kind of setting up. But I'd be crazy not to have the Ravens on my short list, given that the Patriots, again, just have that defensive regression kind of lurking behind the corner or around the corner there. One other one here, the Giants. I mean, look, Dallas just hasn't been consistent this season. They embarrassed the Giants in week 1. That has to stick in the craw of the New York Giants here. You've got to think that this is a game that they've had circled for quite some time after just getting picked apart by Kellen Moore and Dak Prescott. Daniel Jones here instead of Eli Manning, and Eli Manning played pretty well in that first game, was able to move the football against that Dallas defense. Daniel Jones kind of growing up a little bit here over the last couple of games. This line's probably just a little bit too high for Dallas, again, in a road spot with their inconsistencies. But I do think that I like, the other 3 leans I've talked about here a little bit more. So as far as this week goes in the Super Contest, number 4, the Jaguars +1. Number 12, the Vikings +2.5. Number 17, the Raiders -2.5. The 3 very likely picks for me. As far as the leans go, number 7, the Panthers -3.5. Number 16, the Steelers +1. Those are my 2 favorite leans here this week. And then number 19, the Seahawks -6. You've got the Ravens here. They're 3.5-point dog, or they're 3-point dog in the Super Contest, 3.5 in the Circa. So that half point could make a big difference with number 26 in the Super Contest rotation order. And then the Giants, number 28, plus the 7. So those are my picks and my leans here for this week in the NFL for the Super Contest. And again, as always, on Saturdays over at BangTheBook.com, go check out the Super Contest article with the picks for both of our entries, the lines, and the consensus with the pick counts for the Super Contest as well as for the Circa Million. And you can see our recap articles on Tuesday as well.